18 doctors can't save the Korean Mafia boss's baby, until a black girl did the unthinkable that made him freeze. The private VIP wing of Seoul Memorial Hospital had never seen panic like this. 18 of the world's most elite physicians packed into a temperature-controlled suite that costs more per night than most people earned in a year. Their white coats became a blur of desperate movement under imported Italian lighting. Heart monitors shrieked. A ventilator hissed like a countdown. A pediatric specialist from Tokyo barked orders at immunologists flown in from London, while a physician who'd saved 3 royal heirs wiped his palms on his pants and said what everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to admit. We're losing him. Baby Jin Wukong, 6-month-old son of the most feared Korean mafia boss in the city, was dying. And $80,000 an hour in medical genius couldn't tell anyone why. His tiny body had gone mottled. Purple lips, gray fingertips, a rash spreading across his chest like an accusation written in a language no one could read. Every test came back inconclusive. Every treatment failed. And through the half-open supply room door, barely visible in the fluorescent shadows, stood Amara, 19 years old. Curly hair pulled into a rushed ponytail, wearing a borrowed hospital sweater that swallowed her frame and sneakers that had seen better years. She'd spent the last 3 hours being invisible in this hospital, the way she'd learned to be invisible everywhere. The cousin of a night shift cleaner, the girl who carried mop buckets and stayed quiet and absolutely, under no circumstances, wandered into restricted areas guarded by men whose suits cost more than her rent and whose tattoos told stories she didn't want to read. But right now, Amara wasn't looking at the guards. She was staring at the designer blanket folded on the counter, the embroidered silk one with imported thread and a price tag that could have fed her neighborhood for a month. The one her cousin had washed yesterday with a cleaning agent she'd never seen before, something sweet-smelling, floral, something that made her hands tingle for hours afterward. The one every genius in that room had walked past 20 times without a second glance. Amara's hands trembled against the doorframe. She knew what it was. Her grandmother, who'd healed half the women in their community with nothing but herbs and old knowledge and hands that never stopped moving, had taught her to recognize contact toxins before she'd learned to drive. Synthetic compounds. Industrial residues. The invisible poisons that medical schools dismissed because they didn't show up in standard blood work fast enough. The doctors were about to intubate that baby. They were looking for infections, genetic disorders, rare diseases with Latin names. The answer was sitting in plain sight, woven into expensive fabric wrapped around a dying child. Amara looked at the monitors, then at the mafia boss standing like a statue in his wine-colored suit, every muscle locked, every breath controlled. The kind of man who'd built an empire on never showing weakness and was now watching his only son fade. Then at her cousin's face through the supply room window. The woman who'd warned her 1,000 times. Stay quiet. Stay invisible. Don't give them a reason to notice us. She thought about what would happen if she was wrong. Then she thought about what would happen if she was right and said nothing. Amara took a breath, stepped out of the shadows, and walked straight to the sink. What would you risk to speak truth to power when the world has spent your whole life teaching you to stay silent? Amara had learned to make herself invisible by the time she was 10 years old. It wasn't a skill anyone had taught her formally. It was survival. When you grew up in a neighborhood where hospitals were 30 minutes away on a good day, where women whispered about which emergency rooms would actually treat black girls without judgment, where your grandmother became the healer because calling 911 meant risking everything, you learned quickly that your knowledge was valuable but your voice was suspect. You learned to observe without speaking, to know without claiming, to carry wisdom in your bones while the world told you that you didn't belong in rooms where decisions were made. Her grandmother, Mama Diallo, had been a midwife in their community for 40 years. She'd delivered babies, treated infections, talked women through complications that should have killed them, using nothing but herbs from her garden, hands trained by necessity, and a knowledge passed down through generations of women who'd had no choice but to become their own doctors. They'll call it voodoo, Mama Diallo would tell Amara while grinding roots at the kitchen table, her hands steady and sure. They'll call it superstition. They'll call it anything but what it is, medicine that survived because we did. Amara had spent her childhood at that kitchen table, learning plant names in 3 languages, memorizing symptoms and remedies, watching her grandmother save lives that official medicine had written off as too poor, too black, too complicated to care about. You're going to be invisible to them, her grandmother had said on Amara's 16th birthday, the day she'd aced her biology exam and dreamed of medical school. Even when you're standing right in front of them. Even when you're right. Especially when you're right. So you watch. You learn. And when the moment comes, and it will come, you decide who you want to be. That moment was now. Standing at a stainless steel sink in a hospital where she had no business being, holding a mafia boss's baby under running water, while 18 doctors stared at her like she'd lost her mind. The sink was running. The baby had stopped crying, that terrible, final silence that meant time was running out. And Amara's hands were shaking but steady, doing exactly what her grandmother had taught her, while the most powerful men in that room debated whether to throw her out or let her finish. Kang Min-suk hadn't moved. He stood there, wine-colored suit, tattoos creeping up his neck like warnings written in ink, eyes locked on his son. A man who controlled half the city's underground, who made decisions that toppled businesses and ended lives, who'd built his empire on never hesitating. And right now, the king of Seoul's underworld was frozen, watching a black teenage girl do what his $80,000 an hour medical team couldn't. What are you doing? His voice cut through the chaos. Low. Dangerous. Perfectly controlled. Every person in that room went silent. Amara swallowed. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd rehearsed 1,000 conversations in her head about speaking up, about claiming her knowledge, about refusing to be invisible. She'd never rehearsed this one. They're wrong, she said, her voice quieter than she meant but steady enough. All of you are. Hello my friends and loved ones. Thanks for joining me on this beautiful story. As we continue this story, kindly take a moment to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and I love to always hear from you. Where are you watching from and what time is it at your end right now? Thank you for subscribing. The room erupted. You don't know what you're saying, a senior pediatrician snapped, stepping forward. Put the child down immediately. Security. Another doctor started, but Kang Min-suk raised one hand, and the room went silent so fast it felt like the air had been sucked out. Explain, he said to Amara. Just that one word, delivered like a blade. Amara's mind flashed back to her grandmother's kitchen. 8 years old, watching Mama Diallo treat a screaming toddler, while the mother sobbed that the emergency room had turned them away. Not enough insurance. Not enough English. Not enough humanity in the receptionist's eyes to see them as worth saving. When a baby reacts like this, Mama Diallo had said, her hands never stopping their work, and the hospitals can't find why, you ask different questions. Not what's inside. What touched the skin? What did they breathe? What invisible thing did the powerful people bring into the house? Amara blinked back to the present. 18 doctors staring at her. Armed guards with hands drifting toward weapons. A mafia boss who could end her existence with a nod. The rash, she said, turning the baby slightly under the cool running water. The breathing. The sudden collapse. It's not illness. It's exposure. Contact exposure. One doctor scoffed. We would have detected. No, Amara interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. You wouldn't. Because you were looking for something complicated. Something worthy of your expertise. She glanced at the embroidered blanket on the counter. My cousin cleaned that blanket yesterday. She's worked here 6 months, and she told me they gave her a new cleaning solution. Industrial grade. Sweet smelling. Made her hands tingle for hours. Amara met Kang Min-suk's eyes. She was afraid to report it. Afraid she'd lose her job for complaining. The silence shifted. Became dangerous. Amara knew that fear intimately. Her cousin Jada had rules that had kept them both fed, housed, invisible. Never make eye contact with the VIPs. Never speak unless spoken to. Never, ever question anything the powerful people do, because girls like us are replaceable and they know it. Jada had taken this job after 3 others fell through. After landlords stopped returning calls and grocery store managers looked through her like she was made of smoke. After the world had made it clear that women like them, black, poor, unconnected, existed at the mercy of people who could withdraw that mercy on a whim. And now Amara was standing in a restricted wing, contradicting doctors who earned more in a day than her family saw in a year, holding the son of a man whose reputation alone could make people disappear. But the baby's oxygen levels were rising. Slowly. Incrementally. Enough. A nurse checked the monitor. He's stabilizing. Another doctor rushed forward. Heart rates improving. Kang Min-suk stepped closer. Amara forced herself not to flinch. "You're sure?" he asked. Amara thought of all the times her grandmother had been sure. Sure when the hospitals were wrong. Sure when the prescriptions made things worse. Sure when generations of surviving had taught her to read bodies the way doctors read charts. "My grandmother treated contact toxins for 40 years, Amara said. Industrial pesticides on farm worker babies. Chemical burns from cleaning products in houses where women had no choice but to use what they were given. She taught me that water is the first defense. That time is the second. And that sometimes the answer isn't complicated. It's just invisible to people who've never had to think about it." She carefully peeled back the blanket from Jin-woo's arm. The rash was worst where the silk had touched his skin most, wrist, neck, the soft fold of his elbow. "Test the blanket," Kang Min-suk said. It wasn't a request. A nurse grabbed it and ran. The room held its breath. Jin-woo whimpered, then cried. A real cry, full of air and life and fury. The sound broke something in the room. Relief. Humiliation. Disbelief. Amara turned off the water. Her hands shaking now that the crisis was passing. She wrapped the baby in a clean hospital blanket someone thrust at her, avoiding the embroidered one like it was poison. Because it was. The nurse burst back through the door, breathless. Synthetic pesticide compound. High dermal absorption rate. Especially dangerous for infants. Every doctor in the room went still. Kang Min-suk closed his eyes. Just for a second. When he opened them, something in his expression had shifted. Something Amara couldn't quite read, but felt like a door opening in a locked house. Then the monitor screamed again. Jin-woo's oxygen levels plummeted. His lips went gray. "He's crashing," a doctor shouted. And Amara realized with cold, sinking horror. Washing away the toxin was only the beginning. Secondary reaction, the lead pediatrician announced, snapping on fresh gloves. The initial toxin triggered a cascade response. "We need to intubate now." "Wait." Another doctor stepped forward, a specialist whose name tag read Geneva Institute of Immunology. "This could be anaphylaxis. We should administer epinephrine first." "That's absurd." A third cut in, credentials from Johns Hopkins glinting on his badge. "The rash pattern suggests delayed hypersensitivity. Steroids, high dose immediately." The room fractured into controlled chaos. The kind of chaos that looked like expertise but sounded like ego. Amara stood frozen at the sink, Jin-woo still in her arms, as the world's most expensive medical minds talked over, around and through each other. A nurse tried to take the baby from her, but Kang Min-suk raised his hand again. Everyone stopped reaching. "Continue," he said to the doctors. "Explain." The pediatrician from Tokyo pulled up a tablet, screen glowing with test results. Blood work shows elevated eosinophils, suggesting parasitic infection or... Eosinophils are a red herring, the Hopkins doctor interrupted. "Look at the timing. Acute onset, rapid progression. This is vascular compromise, possibly genetic." "We already ruled out genetic factors," someone snapped from across the room. "Then we test again." Amara watched them, these brilliant minds in their expensive coats, wielding their degrees like weapons against each other instead of the problem. She recognized the pattern. Had seen it before in the stories her grandmother told. The time the hospital insisted a laborer's daughter had meningitis when it was pesticide exposure. The time they'd almost performed surgery on a woman for abdominal masses that turned out to be retained cleaning chemicals in her stomach lining from drinking contaminated water. The complicated lie wins over the simple truth, Mama Diallo used to say, because complicated lies pay better. Jin-woo whimpered in Amara's arms. She looked down at him, really looked. His breathing was shallow but present. His color was bad but not worsening. The rash had stopped spreading after the washing. But something else was happening. A tremor in his tiny limbs. A glassy quality to his half-open eyes. Amara had seen this before. Baby Marcus, 3 houses down from her grandmother's, after his mother cleaned their apartment with industrial-strength bleach and didn't rinse properly. The toxin was partially cleared, but the body was still processing what had already been absorbed. "He needs fluids," Amara said quietly. No one heard her. "Prepare the intubation kit. This level of intervention could cause more harm. My research in Oslo clearly demonstrates." "He needs 4 fluids," Amara said louder. To flush his system. The washing removed external exposure, but he's still metabolizing what's already absorbed. The Geneva specialist glanced at her like she'd spoken in another language. That's not. We've already administered. Standard saline, Amara said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. But increased hydration helps process lipid-soluble toxins faster. My grandmother. This isn't folk medicine, the Hopkins doctor said. Not unkindly but with the dismissiveness of someone who'd spent 8 years in medical school and didn't need wisdom from a kitchen table. We're talking about complex biochemistry. I understand that, Amara said. But the intubation will protect his airway, the lead pediatrician cut in, already moving toward Jinwoo with purpose. It's the safest intervention at this stage. Kang Min-suk's eyes narrowed. And if you're wrong? Silence. Then we adjust, the doctor said carefully. But doing nothing is not an option. Amara felt Jinwoo's pulse against her wrist, rapid but present. Felt his small chest rising and falling. Saw the way his fingers curled slightly when she shifted her hold. He wasn't dying. Not right now. He was fighting. But these doctors, with their machines and their protocols and their desperate need to do something worthy of their credentials, were about to override his body's own attempts to heal. What if the blanket isn't the only source? Amara said suddenly. The room went quiet. What? The lead pediatrician turned fully toward her now. Amara's mind raced. My cousin said the cleaning solution was new, that they started using it a week ago. What if it's on other surfaces? His crib, his clothes, his toys. She saw it click in real time, the possibility they hadn't considered. That this wasn't a single exposure but cumulative. That washing the baby once wouldn't be enough if every surface he touched was contaminated. Test everything in the nursery, Kang Min-suk ordered. Now. Guards moved. Nurses scattered. But the lead pediatrician shook his head. That will take hours. This baby doesn't have hours. We proceed with intubation. He reached for Jinwoo. Amara's grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. When doctors make you choose between their ego and a life, choose the life. Let them be angry. Let them call you wrong. But choose the life. Amara pulled back slightly just enough. Please, she said, looking directly at Kang Min-suk. 5 more minutes. Just 5. Let his body try first. The Mafia boss stared at her. Then at his son. Then at the 18 doctors who'd failed to save him until a cleaning woman's cousin had walked into the room. 5 minutes, he said. The lead pediatrician's jaw tightened. Mr. Kang, I strongly advise. 5 minutes. The doctor stepped back, radiating professional offense. And in the silence that followed, as machines beeped and experts bristled, and a 19-year-old girl held a Mafia boss's baby like he was made of starlight, Amara prayed she was right. Because if she wasn't, those 5 minutes might cost everything. 3 minutes passed like drowning. Amara stood at the sink, Jinwoo's small weight growing heavier in her arms, while 18 pairs of eyes watched her like she was either a miracle or a disaster still unfolding. The seconds ticked by on the wall clock, each one a countdown, each one a judgment. Jinwoo's breathing stayed shallow. His color hadn't improved. What have you done? The thought came in her grandmother's voice, but not the gentle teaching voice. The other one. The one Mama Diallo used the night she found out Amara had confronted a school nurse about misdiagnosing a classmate's sickle cell crisis as behavioral issues. You think speaking truth protects you? Her grandmother had said, hands shaking as she gripped Amara's shoulders. You think being right makes you safe? Amara had been 15, naive enough to believe justice mattered more than survival. That nurse reported you to the principal, Mama Diallo continued. Said you were disruptive. Disrespectful. Do you know what those words do to a black girl's record? Do you know how many doors close before you even reach them? Amara had apologized. Had learned to swallow her observations. Had watched that same nurse misdiagnose 2 more students that year while Amara stayed quiet, stayed invisible, stayed safe. The classmate she'd tried to help? Transferred schools. Amara never found out if it was by choice or force. Now, in this $1 million hospital suite, with armed guards and a Mafia boss and doctors whose reputations could bury her with a single phone call, that same choice stared her down. Jinwoo's chest hitched. Once. Twice. Oxygen saturation dropping. a nurse said quietly. The lead pediatrician stepped forward. Time's up. We're intubating. Wait, Amara started. You've had your 5 minutes, he said, not looking at her. This is medicine, not faith healing. Kang Min-suk's expression was unreadable, but his hand moved just slightly toward his son. Amara thought of her cousin Jada. Sweet Jada, who'd cried for an hour when she got this job because it meant health insurance, because it meant rent paid on time, because it meant maybe, finally, stability. Jada, who'd made Amara promise 3 times before bringing her here. Don't talk to anyone. Don't look at anyone. Don't exist. If Amara was wrong, Jada would lose everything. They both would. If Amara was right but couldn't prove it fast enough, the result would be the same. Stay invisible, her survival instinct screamed. Let them do their job. You're 19 years old with a GED and kitchen table training. What do you really know? But Jin-woo's trembling had worsened. His tiny fingers twitched against her arm, not the strong reflex of a healthy baby, but the weak spasm of a body struggling to process poison. And suddenly Amara was 7 years old again, watching her grandmother treat a farm worker's infant while the mother sobbed. The baby had been exposed to pesticides in the fields. The hospital had sent them home with antibiotics that did nothing. Why won't the doctors listen, Mama? Amara had asked. Her grandmother had looked at her with eyes that held centuries of knowing. Because listening to us means admitting they don't know everything. And powerful people would rather let babies die than admit a poor woman knew something they didn't. But that's evil. Mama Diallo finished. Yes, baby. Yes, it is. The memory shattered as the pediatrician reached for Jin-woo. For sedation first, he instructed a nurse. Then we'll secure the airway. If you intubate him now, Amara heard herself say, you'll suppress the exact reflexes helping him clear the toxin. The doctor paused. Excuse me. Amara's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. Coughing. Increased secretions. Those aren't signs of failure. They're signs his body is trying to expel the poison. If you sedate him, you stop that process. That's not. The doctor's face reddened. You don't understand respiratory. His breathing is erratic because he's fighting, Amara interrupted, her voice stronger now. Not because he's losing. She looked down at Jin-woo. His eyes were open just slightly, clouded but aware. Fighting. My grandmother treated 12 babies with pesticide exposure in one summer, Amara continued. 11 survived because she didn't force interventions. She supported the body's natural defenses. 1 died because his family took him to a hospital first, and by the time they brought him to her, the intubation had caused pneumonia and the sedation had. Enough. The Hopkins doctor stepped forward, his face a mask of professional patience worn thin. Mr. Kong, this young woman means well, but she's preventing us from providing life-saving care. We need to proceed. Now, Kang Min-suk looked at Amara. Really looked. What would your grandmother do? He asked quietly. The question broke something open in Amara's chest. She'd say the answer is still in this room, Amara whispered. She'd say we haven't found all the sources yet. She'd say. Jin-woo convulsed. Just once, sharp and violent. Then his breathing stopped. Complete silence. No chest movement. No sound. Nothing. Move. The lead pediatrician lunged forward, and Amara's body acted before her mind finished the thought. Turning, running the water cold again, putting Jin-woo's bare feet directly under the stream. What are you doing? Someone shouted. The shock of cold water hit Jin-woo's skin. He gasped, coughed, screamed. The most beautiful sound Amara had ever heard. The scream cut through the room like lightning through fog. Jin-woo's cry was raw, furious, alive. The sound of a baby who'd just been shocked back into his body and wasn't happy about it. His little legs kicked against the cold water still streaming from the tap. His face scrunched up, turning from gray to pink to red. Get that baby away from the sink! The lead pediatrician roared, lunging forward. 2 security guards moved simultaneously, hands reaching for weapons they hadn't yet drawn. Stop! Kang Min-suk's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Quiet. Absolute. Everyone froze mid-motion. The Mafia boss stepped closer, eyes locked on his son, screaming, fighting, breathing. What did you do? Amara's hands trembled but didn't stop their work, keeping Jin-woo's feet under the cool running water, while supporting his small body against her chest. Cold water shock. It triggers the dive reflex. When babies stop breathing, sometimes the body needs a reset. The shock. That's not protocol, the Geneva specialist said, his voice tight with barely controlled outrage. You could have caused cardiac arrest, hypothermia, neurological. But he's breathing, Amara interrupted, her voice shaking but firm. He stopped, and now he's breathing. Jinwoo wailed louder, as if agreeing. A nurse checked the monitors, her eyes widening. Heart rate it's strengthening. Oxygen saturation rising, slowly but rising. That's impossible, the Hopkins doctor muttered, moving closer to verify the readings himself. The cold water shouldn't. It's not just the cold water, Amara said, adjusting Jinwoo in her arms so his skin stayed under the gentle stream. It's washing away what's still on his skin. The toxin. It's lipid-soluble. It clings. Soap won't help because you'd have to scrub, and his skin is too damaged. But continuous running water, cool enough to slow absorption but not cold enough to cause shock. It keeps removing residue. She turned slightly, nodding toward the embroidered blanket still lying on the counter. That blanket. My cousin used a new industrial cleaning solution on it. The hospital switched suppliers 2 weeks ago. Cheaper contract, bulk order from overseas. She told me it made her hands tingle. That it smelled wrong. Sweet, but chemical sweet. Amara looked at Kang Min-suk. How long has Jinwoo been using that blanket? The Mafia boss's jaw tightened. It was a gift. Arrived 10 days ago. From a business associate. Shanghai. The room went still. Test it, Kang Min-suk said. Not a request. A command that carried the weight of consequences. A nurse grabbed the blanket with gloved hands, rushing it toward the lab. Another nurse returned with preliminary results from the earlier test, her face pale. Sir, the cleaning solution, it's a counterfeit product. Mislabeled as hospital grade, but actually contains organophosphate compounds banned in medical facilities. High dermal absorption rate. Especially dangerous for infants with underdeveloped. Why wasn't this caught? Kang Min-suk's voice dropped to a register that made grown men step back. No one answered. Amara kept the water running. Jinwoo's crying had softened to whimpers now, tired but present. His color was better. Not perfect, but better. The mottled gray-blue fading to a more natural pink. 18 doctors, Kang Min-suk said quietly, looking around the room. Flown in from 4 continents. Millions of dollars in equipment. And none of you thought to test the blanket. With respect, Mr. Kang, the lead pediatrician said carefully. Contact toxins present differently. The symptoms suggested internal. A cleaning woman's cousin figured it out in 3 hours, the Mafia boss interrupted. What's your excuse? The silence was devastating. The Tokyo specialist cleared his throat. The traditional protocols focus on. Your protocols almost killed my son. Amara felt the shift in the room. Power inverting, hierarchies crumbling. These men in their expensive coats, with their prestigious credentials, were being unmade by a teenage girl with kitchen table knowledge and the audacity to trust it. She turned off the water slowly, wrapping Jinwoo in a fresh, uncontaminated blanket a nurse handed her. His breathing was still shallow but steady. His eyes were open now, cloudy but focusing, looking up at her face like he was trying to understand who she was, and why she'd decided to torture him with cold water. He's not out of danger yet, Amara said quietly. The toxin that's already been absorbed, his body still has to process it. He'll need 4 fluids. Monitoring. Maybe activated charcoal if the levels are. Tell us what he needs, Kang Min-suk said. All of it. The lead pediatrician's face reddened. Mr. Kang, surely you're not suggesting we take medical direction from the person who saved my son? The Mafia boss's eyes were cold. Yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. A nurse checked the monitors again. Oxygen saturation is at 89%, up from 72. Another nurse noted Jinwoo's temperature. Core temp stable. Skin color improving. The Hopkins doctor stepped forward reluctantly. The improvement is notable, but we still need comprehensive. Then do comprehensive, Kang Min-suk said. But she stays. And you listen to what she says. Amara's knees nearly buckled with the weight of what had just happened. Not just that Jinwoo was breathing. Not just that she'd been right, but that for the first time in her life, someone with power had chosen to listen. The lab results came back in 12 minutes. 12 minutes of Jinwoo breathing, ragged but steady, while 18 of the world's most accomplished physicians stood in a temperature-controlled suite and watched a teenage girl prove them catastrophically wrong. A nurse entered with a tablet, her face carefully neutral. She handed it to Kang Min-suk without a word. He read. His expression didn't change, but something in his stillness shifted. The way stone shifts before an avalanche. Organophosphate compound, he read aloud. Synthetic pesticide derivative. Banned for use in 17 countries. High dermal toxicity. Absorption rate in infants, he stopped. Looked up. Potentially fatal within 6 to 8 hours of sustained contact. The Geneva specialist cleared his throat. Mr. Kang, I want to assure you that our diagnostic process followed every standard. How long was he wrapped in that blanket? Kang Min-suk asked, his voice too quiet. No one answered. How long? Louder now. Dangerous. He sleeps with it, a nurse whispered. Has for the past week. We thought it was helping him settle. The Hopkins doctor stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture that might have been placating or defensive. Contact toxins of this nature are exceedingly rare in hospital settings. The probability, Kang Min-suk repeated, the word sharp as broken glass. My son almost died because you calculated probability instead of looking at what was in front of you. The lead pediatrician's face flushed. With respect, the symptoms were consistent with multiple conditions. We followed evidence-based protocols. Your protocols, Kang Min-suk interrupted, are written by people who've never had to survive on knowledge the world refuses to value. He looked at Amara, who was swaying slightly on her feet, Jinwoo still in her arms. The baby had stopped crying, his small body relaxing into sleep. The kind of sleep that comes after the body has fought a war and finally, tentatively, believes it might be safe. Amara felt the room spinning. The adrenaline that had carried her through the last hour was draining away, leaving nothing but the enormity of what had almost happened, what she'd almost failed to prevent, what she'd risked, what she'd done. Her grandmother's voice echoed. Sometimes babies like him die, because no one like us is in the room. Jinwoo stirred against her chest, a tiny sound of contentment escaping his lips. And Amara started crying. Not sobbing. Just tears, silent and unstoppable, running down her face while she stood there holding a mafia boss's son, and feeling the weight of 18 doctors' stares and her own grandmother's ghost telling her, you did it, baby. You saved him. Kang Min-suk moved toward her. Every guard in the room stiffened. He stopped 3 feet away, looked at his son, breathing steadily in Amara's arms, looked at her tear-streaked face, looked at the sink where she'd stood her ground against every expert in the room. Then he bowed. Not a nod, not a gesture. A full bow 30 degrees, held for 3 seconds that felt like years. When he straightened, his eyes were different. Still controlled, still dangerous, but with something else underneath. Something raw. You saved my son, he said quietly. And you humiliated every powerful man in this room by being right when we were all catastrophically wrong. Amara's voice came out broken. I didn't mean to. I know, he interrupted. That's why it matters. The Tokyo specialist set down his tablet. Mr. Kang, I believe I speak for all of us when I say. You don't, Kang Min-suk said, not looking away from Amara. You don't speak for anything except your own failure tonight. The room went dead silent. My son should be dead, the mafia boss continued. Your expertise said he was dying. Your machines couldn't tell you why. Your protocols led nowhere. He paused. A cleaning woman's 19-year-old cousin, with no medical degree and no reason to risk herself, walked into this room and did what none of you could. The lead pediatrician opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the floor. How much do I owe you? Kang Min-suk asked Amara. She blinked, confused. What? For saving Jinwoo? Name your price. Amara shook her head, still crying. I don't want money. I couldn't let him die. I couldn't watch it happen and do nothing. Why not? The question was genuine. He's not your family. Not your responsibility. You risked everything by speaking. Why? Amara looked down at Jinwoo, sleeping peacefully now against her borrowed sweater. Because silence kills people like me first, she whispered. But sometimes it kills babies like him too. And I'm tired of silence winning. Kang Min-suk nodded slowly, something like understanding crossing his face. He turned to the room. I want every supply delivery investigated. Every cleaning product tested. Every vendor contract reviewed. His voice dropped. And I want to know who sent that blanket. A guard moved immediately toward the door, already making calls. The mafia boss looked back at Amara. Where's your cousin? Amara's heart seized. Please, she didn't know. She just used what they gave her. She needs this job, she can't. Where is she? I think she's in the supply wing. Please, Mr. Kong, don't. Bring her here, he told a nurse. Then to Amara. She's getting promoted. And a raise. And I'm documenting her role in identifying the toxin vector. Amara stared at him. You thought I was going to punish her, he said. Not a question. Powerful people usually do. Yes, Kang Min-suk said quietly. We usually do. He reached out slowly, giving Amara time to refuse, and took his son from her arms. Jin-woo settled against his father's chest without waking, tiny fingers curling into expensive fabric. The mafia boss looked at his child, really looked, like he was seeing him for the first time after almost losing him forever. And for just a moment, the most feared man in the city let his controlled facade crack. Just enough to be human. The hospital's administrative wing erupted before dawn. 3 physicians resigned. 2 were asked to take leave. The lead pediatrician's contract was under review. By sunrise, whispers had spread through every corridor. A cleaning woman's cousin had exposed the most expensive medical team in the country as incompetent, and heads were rolling. Amara didn't witness any of it. She'd been moved to a private room on the VIP floor, told to rest, given clothes that actually fit and food she was too nervous to eat. Guards stood outside her door. Not threatening. Just there. She hadn't seen Jada since last night. Hadn't been allowed to leave. Hadn't been told if she was a guest or a prisoner. At 6 a.m., Kang Min-suk entered without knocking. He'd changed clothes, still expensive, now black instead of wine-colored, but the tattoos were the same. The eyes were the same. The controlled danger radiating from him like heat from concrete in summer. We found the supplier, he said, closing the door behind him. Amara sat up straighter on the pristine couch. And? Hong Kong Shell Company. 3 layers deep. Fake certifications. They've been selling counterfeit medical supplies to 17 hospitals across 4 countries. He paused. The blanket was a gift from a rival syndicate. The Zhao family. Shanghai operation. The room temperature seemed to drop. They knew, Amara said slowly. The blanket was poisoned on purpose. Yes. To kill Jinwoo. To send a message, Kang Min-suk corrected. That I'm vulnerable. That my family isn't safe. That my power has limits. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. They didn't account for you. Amara's hands trembled. What happens now? To them. Something dark flickered across his face. They'll be handled. That's not what I meant. She forced herself to meet his eyes. What happens to me? To my cousin? To my family? Kang Min-suk sat in the chair across from her. Not close but not distant. That depends. On what? On whether you understand what you've become. Amara's chest tightened. I don't understand. You saved my son, he said quietly. You exposed my enemies. You humiliated powerful people who now want to discredit you to save their reputations. And you did it all while being someone the world has trained to stay invisible. He leaned forward slightly. Do you know what that makes you? Dangerous, Amara whispered. Exactly. The silence stretched between them. The hospital administration wants you gone, Kang Min-suk continued. They're calling you reckless. Untrained. A liability who got lucky. 3 board members have suggested legal action for unauthorized medical intervention. Amara felt her stomach drop. But I saved him. Which makes their failure worse. They can't let you be right without being catastrophically wrong. So they're rewriting the story. He pulled out his phone, showed her a preliminary hospital report. See, they're crediting rapid response protocols and multidisciplinary collaboration. Your name appears once. As a footnote. She read the words, feeling something in her chest crack. They're erasing me. They're trying to. He put the phone away. They'll fail. How can you be sure? Because I'm rewriting a different story. His eyes were sharp. One where a brilliant young woman exposed systemic negligence and saved a life while the so-called experts stood by. One where hospitals need to rethink who they listen to and why. One where your grandmother's knowledge gets documented, respected, studied. Amara stared at him. Why would you do that? Because you asked me a question last night, Kang Min-suk said. You asked why you should speak up when no one would listen. Do you remember what you said? She did. That silence kills people like us first. Yes. And then you said something else. Something that's been echoing in my head since. He leaned back. You said, but sometimes babies like him die too. Amara nodded slowly. You didn't just save my son because you knew how, the mafia boss said. You saved him because you understood something most people never do. That injustice doesn't stay contained. That the systems that crush the powerless eventually fail everyone. Even kings. Even their children. He stood, walked to the window overlooking the city waking up below. I've built an empire on power, he continued. On making people afraid. On controlling everything I can control. He turned back to her. Last night, I couldn't control anything. 18 experts failed. Millions of dollars of equipment failed. Everything I'd built to protect my family failed. He paused. And a 19-year-old girl with nothing to gain and everything to lose walked into that room and saved everything. What are you saying? Amara asked. I'm saying you're right. Silence kills. His expression hardened. And I'm done being silent about the people who tried to kill my son. He made a phone call. Spoke in Korean, low-clipped, decisive. Hung up. The Zhao syndicate will be dismantled by the end of the week, he said. The hospital board will approve a new safety protocol by the end of the month. One that includes testing all imported supplies and listening to staff regardless of rank. And your cousin will head the new oversight committee. Amara's eyes widened. Jada? But she's the person who identified the contaminated supplies, he finished. She'll be trained, supported, protected, along with you. I don't want your protection, Amara said, surprising herself. I want to finish school. I want to go to medical school. I want my grandmother's knowledge to matter, but I want my own knowledge to matter too. Kang Min-suk smiled, barely, but it was there. Then you'll have it. Scholarship. References. Whatever you need. He moved toward the door then stopped. But understand this. You're in the story now. You can't go back to invisible. I don't want to, Amara said quietly. He nodded. Good. Because the world needs more people who refuse to stay silent. He left. And somewhere in the city, before the sun fully rose, 17 hospitals received anonymous reports about their supply chains. 3 board members resigned. A Hong Kong shell company's bank accounts were frozen. And a rival syndicate learned what happens when you try to kill a king's son. 3 weeks later, Jean Wu laughed for the first time since the poisoning. Amara was there when it happened. Sitting in the private recovery suite while a pediatric specialist, a new one, carefully vetted, deeply humble, ran the final tests. Jean Wu grabbed the stethoscope, delighted by the cold metal, and giggled. The sound filled the room like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Kang Min-suk, standing by the window, closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Relief written in the set of his shoulders. Full recovery, the doctor said quietly. No lasting damage. His liver processed the toxin completely. It's remarkable, really. It's Amara, the mafia boss said, looking at her. It's what happens when someone acts in time. The doctor nodded, properly chastened. Yes, sir. Outside that room, the world had shifted. The Zhao syndicate hadn't made the news. Rival operations don't announce their dismantling. They simply cease to exist. Shipments rerouted. Accounts frozen. Key players vanishing into early retirements that weren't voluntary or safe. The message sent wasn't public. But it was received. Seoul's underworld knew. Kang Min-suk's son had been targeted, and the response had been absolute. But something else had changed too. Something quieter. More dangerous to the systems that relied on silence. The hospital had tried to bury the story. They'd failed. An anonymous source, later traced to one of the nurses who'd watched Amara save Jean Wu, had leaked everything. Not to tabloids. To medical journals. To oversight committees. to safety organizations that suddenly had questions about supply chain protocols, and who gets listened to in emergencies. Within 2 weeks, 17 hospitals across 3 countries had revised their safety standards. Imported supplies now required triple verification. Cleaning staff gained access to anonymous reporting systems. And a new advisory board position was created, one that included perspectives from non-physician healthcare workers. Jada was offered the first seat. She'd cried for an hour before accepting. "Your grandmother's methods are being documented," Kang Min-suk told Amara during one of their follow-up meetings. He'd started calling them that, meetings, not summons. Like she was a consultant, not a subject. "Medical anthropologists from 3 universities want to interview you. Record what she taught you. Study the intersection of traditional knowledge and modern medicine." Amara sat across from him in his office. Not the underground one she'd imagined, but a legitimate space in a downtown high-rise. Expensive but not ostentatious. Powerful but not theatrical. "I don't want to be studied like an artifact," she said carefully. "Then don't be." He slid a folder across the desk. "Be a student instead." She opened it. Full scholarship to Seoul National University. Pre-med track. Housing included. Stipend for living expenses. A letter of recommendation from the hospital's new chief of medicine. A woman who'd spent 20 years treating underserved communities before being recruited to reform the institution. "This is too much," Amara whispered. "It's not enough," Kang Min-suk said. "But it's what I can give. What you do with it is your choice." Amara looked at the papers, feeling the weight of opportunity and expectation tangled together. "People are going to say I don't deserve this. That I got lucky. That you're rewarding me because I saved your son, not because I earned it." "Let them say it," he replied. "You and I both know the truth. You've been earning this your entire life. The world just refused to see it." He stood, walked to the window overlooking the city. "I've spent 20 years building power. Making people fear me. Controlling what I could control." He turned back. "And I never once questioned who was invisible in my own organization. Who cleaned my offices. Who made my food. Who raised the children of my associates." His expression hardened. "I won't make that mistake again." "What does that mean?" Amara asked. "It means every person in my employment will be seen, protected, heard. It means the people who keep my world running will have access to education, healthcare, legal protection." He paused. "It means I'm done pretending power doesn't come with responsibility." Amara studied him. "You're not doing this out of guilt." "No." He met her eyes. "I'm doing it because you taught me something I should have known. That silence protects the guilty and kills the innocent. And I'm done being protected by silence." 6 months later, the Mama Diallo Institute for Traditional and Integrative Medicine opened in Amara's old neighborhood. Funded anonymously. Staffed by practitioners who bridged cultural knowledge and modern protocols. Free for anyone who needed it. Amara didn't attend the opening. She was in anatomy class, taking notes on respiratory systems, proving every day that she belonged in rooms that had once felt impossible to enter. But she sent flowers. And a note that read, "For the grandmothers who healed when hospitals wouldn't. For the women who saved lives the world refuses to count. For the children who learned to trust their knowledge even when the world called it worthless." The note wasn't signed. But everyone knew who wrote it. Kang Min-suk kept the note in his office. Right next to a photo of Jin-woo, healthy, laughing, alive. A reminder that power without wisdom is just violence waiting to collapse. And that sometimes the people who save the world are the ones the world taught to stay invisible. Until they refuse. Years later, Dr. Amara Diallo would stand in a hospital conference room and teach physicians about contact toxins, environmental exposure, and the importance of listening to the people closest to the problem. She would never mention the night she saved a mafia boss's baby. But everyone in that room would know. Because some stories don't need to be told. They just need to change everything that comes after. Jin Woo-kong grew up knowing his life was saved by a girl his father's world had trained him not to see. He remembered the story differently than the adults did. He remembered warmth, cold water, a voice that was scared but steady, arms that held him like he mattered. When he was 7, he asked his father, "Why didn't the doctors save me?" Kang Min-suk, older now, tattoos fading but eyes still sharp, said, because they were looking for complicated answers. Amara was looking for the truth. What's the difference? Jinwoo asked. His father smiled. One requires credentials. The other requires courage. Jinwoo thought about that. I want to be like Amara. Good, his father said. The world needs more people like her. Somewhere across the city, in a modest apartment near the university, Amara was studying for her boards. She just finished a rotation in toxicology, had published a paper on environmental exposure in pediatric cases, was being recruited by hospitals that had once tried to erase her from their records. She didn't think about fame, or revenge, or vindication. She thought about the next baby, the next crisis, the next moment when someone needed to speak up, and everyone else was silent. And she practiced her voice. Because once, when 18 doctors failed and the world expected her to stay quiet, a girl who was never supposed to be there did the unthinkable, and saved everything.